Right. What's up, guys? My name is Gus, and this is the Ortiz Anomaly podcast. We typically have a guest, but this week we don't have a guest, so I'm just going to be kind of chopping it up with you guys. And basically, what I wanted to talk about today is we typically talk about business, the economy, real estate. There's a lot of interesting things happening, I think, in both in the real estate world as well in the business world. There's a lot of political things that are happening that uh, it's hard to know how all of it's going to play out. So I'd be interested to hear if you guys have any thoughts on, just some of the activities that are happening in the world that I think ultimately will have an impact in a lot of things that we're doing. So just our daily lives and whatnot. And I know that there are some concerns from some people about different things that are happening I guess, based on what's happening in the political world. So let's get in really quickly. Let's get into real estate. So some interesting things that I was able to kind of get some news on, which I thought was really impactful. So the age demographic of 20-year-olds to 30-year-olds, which is just sort of a specific age demographic. That age demographic seems to be exiting Florida. So we're here in Florida, and obviously we get a lot of retirees, and so that sort of increases the average age of the person here in Florida. But in addition to that, we're seeing an exodus of people that are between the ages of 20 and 30. And that's problematic because it means that our workforce is leaving. Because as people, that are 30 to 40 start moving up in age and those people start retiring, right, we have less of a younger workforce to be able to help with some of the jobs that, they should be able to, that would normally be in that age bracket, right? Because typically younger people are usually single, they don't necessarily have family to support. And that's not, of course, that's not always the case, but it's pretty common for younger people to just kind of be, single, or maybe their partner, but they don't have kids or something like that. So that's not unusual. But that it is unusual that they are leaving. And the reason why they're leaving is because the job market here for that age demographic is not great. There are not a lot of good paying jobs for people that are between the ages of 20 and 30. Now, part of that may be the type of jobs that are here. The other part, honestly, is that I think employers may have to rethink their strategy on how to pay employees. I think that will happen by default. Because I think what'll happen is that if younger people are not willing to take those jobs for less money, definitely older people are not going to be willing to take those jobs for less money, right? So, instead of a 25-year-old taking that waiter job, now you have a 35-year-old taking that waiter job. In order for that job to make sense for that 35-year-old who probably now may be married, have kids, they have a mortgage to pay, right? Whatever the case may be, they have responsibilities that are probably a higher priority than the responsibilities a 25-year-old will have. They are going to require more income in order for them to be able to take the job in the first place, which will require employers to have to pay people more money in order to have employees in the first place. So I think it's a terrible way for us to have to increase wages. But I think what'll likely happen is that as young people leave and older people, because those jobs are not going away, right? It's not like they're leaving because there aren't jobs. They're leaving because the jobs that are here aren't paying well enough, but those are jobs that are needed. So, for example, someone who's either waiting tables or working at the parks, for example, or, working at McDonald's even, right? Like those folks those are typically lower wage jobs. And it's unfortunate because, those are jobs that are definitely needed in our communities. It's not like people don't want to go out to eat, don't want to enjoy their evenings or afternoons, or go to the parks or whatever. Those things have value, which is why people pay money to do those things in the first place. So if if the younger demographic is not there, and an older demographic has to go ahead and fill those jobs, I would argue that that older demographic is going to need more money in order for them to be willing to take those jobs. So that's a real problem, and I think it will solve itself. It'll solve itself in a way that's not ideal for the state of Florida, because it still means that those 20 to 30-year-olds already left. Are they going to come back because now job wages are higher? I hope so, but that is going to take time, because it's going to take time for employers to realize that the challenge that they have is they have to pay their employees more money. I can't imagine they don't know that, but I would imagine that, especially for companies that are not private, that they're public, when they're looking at profitability and their margins, the last thing they want to do is increase wages, right? They want to try to keep their profit margins as high as possible, which is their right to do, right? But the exchange for that is going to be important, right? If they can't provide a good service because they can't find a good enough employees or good employees at the right price, then their service, the level of service will go down, and people will stop doing those things. They'll stop eating at those restaurants. They'll stop going to those parks. They'll stop just sort of doing those activities, and then those companies are going to ultimately suffer in the long term. So I'm hopeful that will not be a permanent situation, that they will realize that sooner than later, before all of our young folks are out of the state. Otherwise, the state has a lot of positive things going for it. Just that's a real big negative, right? There's a lot of growth happening in the state, but that growth is coming from a lot of retirees coming here, and then a lot of the services that support those retirees. So that's a big portion of it. And then I think I've talked about this before, but there's technology coming, both hardware and software coming to the fray, that also I think will impact a lot of the economy that's happening in Central Florida. But anyways, that was a piece of news that was really surprising to me. I was really disheartened by that, because I have kids that are in their 20s, and they don't live in Florida because there are more opportunities outside of Florida. I mean, my middle child's husband, he ended up finding a remote job with technology, and he gets paid great money, but that's not something that he wouldn't be able to get paid that here in Florida. So it's disheartening to see that, and I think that our economy, and it's really going to come down to the individual businesses, are going to have to make some changes to their hiring practices, specifically how they pay wages. I think that's going to be a challenge that Florida is going to have to address quickly. We are not we're at the bottom of the totem pole as it relates to average wages per capita. So I do think that it's going to be important, especially as we continue to become a growing state, and our economy is impacted. We have a growing economy. It just makes sense for us to increase wages. I'll be surprised if we didn't. So that was a piece of news that was really surprising to me. I didn't expect to read about that. It was really, really surprising to me. So I really hope that our economy kind of shifts to better paying jobs, and that's really going to be a function of employers having a willingness to pay more for the employees that bring those services to the table. So that's one of the things that I definitely want to talk about as it relates to the economy. I guess that would be more of an economy thing that's happening. As it relates to real estate, in our market, at least, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the housing, and then a little bit about the commercial real estate. So the housing real estate market is interesting. There's been a big pullback across the nation with regard to real estate. And for us here in Florida, we're not really we are seeing a pullback, but it's not going in the negative, right? It's basically, the average, the medium home price has basically stayed the same for about a year. So we haven't really seen a ton of growth happening here. There are going to be pockets within Florida where you see some growth, and then other pockets where you see some declines. But generally speaking, the median income, or rather, I'm sorry, the median price point has stayed the same year over year. So we haven't really seen any real movement. I mean, I think it went up by maybe almost a 1%. Like, it was within the margin of error. So it's hard to say how much that is. So but we've not seen really any major growth as it relates to that, and a lot of that has to do with interest rates where they are right now, and people are just nervous to buy, and the economy is kind of up in the air, and people are nervous. We definitely saw a lot of that anxiety prior to the elections. We did see a little bit of a bump of activity after elections, and then come January we saw some more activity, and now in February we're seeing a little more activity. So it seems like there's a little bit more confidence in the market. I think I think that isn't necessarily because specifically the current administration is in place. I think it's just because there is more certainty about what administration is in place. The fact that the current administration is in place, I mean, one could argue that may be a reason for, and I'm sure that is a reason for a lot of people. But I think both parties and independents are buying houses. So clearly there's just I guess generally more confidence in at least knowing who is running the administration. Whether or not you think that's a good or bad thing, that is a whole other conversation. So, we are seeing, people are still buying homes. The average price point, like I said, is staying pretty stagnant, but it is still kind of slightly moving in an upward direction. A lot of that has to do with people that are continuing to move here. We're still seeing a lot of retirees that are moving here. That baby boomer. I think the baby boomers are probably going to be coming in probably well into the 2030s, probably into like the mid 2030s. We'll probably continue to see baby boomers moving to Florida. But that actually creates a really interesting dynamic, because the baby boomers that are coming in, a lot of them have legacy pensions and retirements and stuff like that. So, they have a lot of that sort of extra income, and not all of them. Obviously, that's not the case for everyone, but a lot of them do. A lot of them will have some sort of like, additional income they can use to spend to go out to eat and to go out and do entertainment and activities and stuff like that. So there is likely to be an economy driven directly by that community. One, because of the additional income that they have to be able to spend. So they'll be eating at more restaurants and doing more entertainment activities and stuff like that. So that's one. And two, because that community in particular has a need for medical support. So there's going to be a lot of healthcare and medicine that is going to be supported specifically by that demographic. And of course, when they get into like, Medicare and Medicaid, a lot of stuff is covered. So the healthcare industry is essentially, they're actually going to be positioned really well, because, they're not going to have to worry about whether or not people can afford, at that age, whether people can afford to get some kind of healthcare support, because typically between Medicare and Medicaid, they're going to be able to get some kind of healthcare services. So to what extent is really what it's going to, it's not going to be if, it's going to be how much, right? So that healthcare industry is going to continue to grow as that demographic grows, because the more people of retirement age come to Florida, that's an aging population. They need some healthcare support. And a lot of that, and it can be all kinds of stuff. Like, it's not just like, oh, they need medicine or they need to go to a doctor. A lot of people that are in that demographic are also trying to be more active. So, things like yoga studios and, these workout places, physical therapy, and, just stuff that's more healthcare, health and wellness related. Those types of businesses, I think, are going to do really well, specifically around those aging populations. So I think the more that age group grows, the more that healthcare and health and wellness, the health and wellness industry grows, and that is going to be a boom for that particular industry. And those are going to be jobs. Typically, those jobs are pretty decent paying. Even at the bottom rung of those roles, they're decent paying. So those are going to be people who will be paid pretty well. They themselves will likely have some expendable income to go ahead and also do entertaining and eating out and all that good stuff. So there's going to be a little bit of a economic boom that's specifically tied to that retirement base that's coming to Florida, which again is good in the short term. But of course, as baby boomers age and eventually, they will pass, then we're going to start seeing that diminish. So that can't be the only thing that holds Florida up. We're going to need to have more things. Now, some good things to look at as it relates to our economy is that I think we have pretty good diversity. So we still have the parks and we still have people coming in here for vacationing, the beaches. So that's all still there, which is great. And that'll be there for obviously for a very long time. But again, we don't want to be a one-trick pony. So this is good. Let's think about this, right? We have the parks, we have the beaches, right? We have all of this sort of hospitality, vacationing industry, right? That is available for us to be able to generate revenue from. We have the baby boomers that are moving into the area and the sort of microeconomy that's built around them, and specifically as it relates to health and wellness. In addition to that, we're also seeing technology companies that are coming from California, as well as some advanced manufacturing companies that are coming from around the country. So we're seeing, and that includes technologies like, Google. We're seeing, oh my goodness, data centers that are being built specifically to support some of these technology companies. And then we're seeing aerospace and technology that's also coming here, primarily because of what's happening on the Space Coast, right? So there's a lot of activity happening on the Space Coast. And I think that is going to be a driver of more advanced businesses. So this would be advanced manufacturing. This would be obviously software technologies. And I think some of those may be backed by some more standard manufacturing, right? That may also exist that will be working to support some of the advanced manufacturing elements. Now, some of that stuff they're going to be probably shipping in, but there's a good chance that we might see some more traditional steel making. I know that one of the things that we're trying to do is bring chips here. There's no reason why they couldn't have something like that here in Florida. So, the microchips specifically. But I think that whole industry that's happening over on the Space Coast, that is also a really great economic, I would say, catapult, because those jobs, again, are going to be all high paying jobs. These are engineers and architects and computer scientists. So these are all jobs that are also going to generate some pretty good jobs here in the area. So, and then the last leg of that is, like him or not, right? And I don't know what your position is as it relates to DeSantis. He's done some good things. And one of the good things that he's actually done is he opened up the ports when California was backed up during COVID. If you remember, California was backed up, not letting any ships coming in. DeSantis opened up the ports here in Florida and to allow for some distribution to happen, and that opened up a whole arm of distribution in Florida that didn't really exist prior to COVID. So we saw a boom of industrial warehousing, distribution centers, distribution routes that were created. A lot of like truck related businesses started coming into the fray because there's a lot more truckers coming in, and it really created a huge distribution, I guess you could say, economy, right? Where so many more items are coming in through the ports for the purpose of distribution than we saw in the past. So this is a whole other, element of business that exists here in Florida, to be able to distribute different things across the state, in the southeastern region, right? All that good stuff. And the southeastern region is a, it's a solid region. I mean, I think that Georgia is a very has a lot of activity in it, especially with the city of Atlanta sitting in the middle, and all the other secondary cities that are there. You got South Carolina and North Carolina that all have have some really great cities as well, and their economies are not terrible. So I mean, I think that you have even Tennessee and whatnot. So I think that this whole sort of southeastern corridor is pretty has a lot of potential for a need for distribution of items, and if they can come in through Florida ports to get that distribution happening. Florida itself is already a big state. So then in addition to that, we could also do distribution to sort of the southeastern region from these ports. That's really, really powerful stuff. So you have distribution, that is essentially becoming kind of a major thing here in Florida. I mean, if you look at even Kroger's, for example, that came into Groveland. So Kroger's has been trying to get into Florida for quite a long time, and Publix has basically prevented them from being able to do that. So they built a state-of-the-art, essentially robot building. I mean, I've been in it. It's unbelievable. The whole building is essentially a robot, and it automates all of the distribution, most of the distribution. I was like, excuse me, like 80% of the distribution component of organizing all of the orders is all robotic. So it is a really fascinating building. They built that with the purpose of being able to distribute from Groveland out to the rest of Florida. And, if you are not aware geographically of where Groveland sits in a pocket that is essentially about 4 hours from every major city. Maybe it's 4.5 hours from every major city in Florida. So, that's a great distribution point for any distribution center. So this whole Central Florida area has been growing with distribution centers, primarily because it's so easy to access all the different corners of Florida from this area. So Lakeland and Lake County essentially have become sort of these sort of epicenters for distribution, which I think is going to be really powerful. And continue to allow the state to grow. So you have this element, and then you have what's coming in from the coast. That this is all of these sort of space coast, aerospace, advanced manufacturing businesses that are likely to come. And then Orlando has been really diligent about focusing attention on bringing headquarters here. So they want to bring headquarters for all different major corporations here. So this becomes their headquarters, which would also bring a lot of, high income employees to the area. They are looking to continue to bring aerospace and technology here. They're continuing to bring, focusing on bringing software technologies here, and they're continuing to bring the healthcare industry here. So there's a huge push from Orlando and their development plan to bring those industries here. So they're being very friendly specifically to those industries, which I think is really smart because it diversifies our economy and allows us to be shielded from any major spikes that might happen in one industry versus another. Now, obviously, if there's a major spike in the entire economy, that would cause some challenges. But, if there is just an issue with healthcare or just an issue with aerospace or just an issue with software, we still have all of these other sort of, economic blocks that will allow our local economy to still be, to still sustain without having too much, without being hit too hard, right? So that I think is really, really smart on the part of strategic planning for Central Florida. Now, I don't know if that comes from all the way at the top, governor level, or if that's just Orlando trying to think outside the box and be a little bit more diverse in the type of businesses that it brings. But I do think that is a smart plan. It allows for the state to be really diverse in the types of businesses that are here. and ultimately provides a little bit more security for the homeowners that are here. So you can see how like some of the I know I was going to talk about like the residential versus the commercial, but you can see that there's a lot of tie-in between the two. So in commercial, what this means for commercial is that distribution centers have been on the for a while we're on sort of one of the main things, the big things to purchase. Right now, I think they built them too fast is the problem. So they're trying to fill them. I do think that's going to catch up, and we're going to start getting more of those sort of distribution and industrial type buildings. So I think that will continue to move forward. We're not seeing a shortage. I'm sorry, we're not seeing an oversupply so much as of industrial. It's the type of industrial that is what we're trying to, I guess, identify. So distribution centers, I think, are doing pretty good in terms of their supply. Right? They're filling up. They're starting to fill up those. The ones that we're having a little bit of a challenge on is those sort of small to medium sized industrial centers, which is a little bit more difficult. We're not seeing as many of those, and there's a big need for those. Right? These are sort of for your local electrician and floor guys and roofers and stuff like that, like those types of smaller, where they only need 2,500 to 5,000 square feet. Those are a little bit harder to find. So there's definitely going to be a continued need for that in the commercial sector. And then, like I said, the healthcare industry is growing. So medical office is one of those areas where we're seeing a lot of potential growth. If you have a traditional office space, then maybe it might be a good idea to consider transitioning over to a medical space. Now, there is a cost to that, but the tenants you're going to get are going to be super high quality tenants. They're going to be medical tenants. They usually pay on time. They usually pay a premium, and they usually have long leases. So I think it's a really good consideration. Retail is actually surprisingly doing pretty decent. I thought retail was going to have a little bit of a hiccup, but we haven't seen retail slow down very much, at least not in the secondary and tertiary markets. Now, in the main market, which is Orlando, there is definitely more inventory available for both office as well as for retail space. So it's more than what we've seen in the recent past. But in the secondary and tertiary markets, there's hardly any availability. There's not a lot of options that are available for retailers and for office space, which is surprising to me. But I guess that's indicative of people leaving. Maybe they had their offices in Orlando, and then they decided to, move maybe closer to home or just outside of Orlando because maybe there was a premium to pay at the time. But now what we're starting to see is the pricing of assets that are in secondary and tertiary markets are rivaling those that are in the primary market of Orlando. So that's a really interesting dynamic where, before it used to be Orlando would be where you'd pay the premium because that's the city. And then the secondary and tertiary markets, you get a bit of a discount on the same type of building just because it was in a secondary or tertiary market. But now we're starting to see a little bit of sort of like similar pricing. It's still a little bit different, but still similar, much more similar than we've seen in recent history. So that's an interesting dynamic to see. Multifamily slowed down quite a lot, during the pandemic, but it looks like it's starting to pick up again. We're getting a lot more inquiries for multifamily and for multifamily development. So I think there may be some confidence that's in the market as it relates to multifamily. So we'll see how that turns out. I'm interested to see, how investors are looking at wanting to do investments like this. Multifamily can be tricky. You can make a ton of money from it, but if the numbers aren't right, you could also lose money. You can lose your shares on it. So it's a tricky one. But I'm interested to see how that one turns out. Mobile home parks actually and like RV parks are actually very hard to find right now, and they are actually being sold at a premium. We're seeing those, I think a lot of that has to do with mobile home parks tend to be recession proof. And I think if people are concerned about recessions, then that's a good asset to hold on to because they tend to do really well during recessions. And a lot of that has to do with, that's kind of like that's the last place that you could potentially afford before you're kind of in a place where like I'm homeless, right? And that's sad to say, but it is sort of the last banyan of hope to still have a roof over your head, for a cost that's affordable. So those are some of the things that are happening kind of in the commercial realm. uh, you know, Cap rates continue to move in an upward direction for the most part, with the exception of like mobile and RV parks. But so we are definitely seeing cap rates kind of adjust there. And if you're not familiar with how cap rates work as it relates to commercial assets, they have an inverse relationship to value. So as cap rates go up, the value of the property goes down. The way the calculation works, they have an inverse relationship. As cap rates go down, the property values go up. So typically, it's related to a lot of times it's related to risk. So usually the market dynamics will have an impact in cap rates. So if you're looking at a property that is a very safe bet, so a safe bet would be something like a medical office that was built 5 years ago that has five tenants and all tenants are medical and all tenants have a 10 to 15-year lease, right? That's a pretty safe bet. The likelihood of those tenants leaving very low. Medical office tenants tend to stay. They tend to also extend their lease. So really, really great, right? The cap rate on a project like that would probably be pretty low because the risk on a purchase like that is also really, really low. Now, if you're looking at a hotel that is 15 years old, or let's say 15 years old, and maybe it's in an area that is not as strong for vacationing, or just doesn't have. It's not like in a corridor that gives you easy access to the parks or to the beach or anything. It's just sort of like in an area that people could use a hotel, but it's not necessarily prime area. And maybe the area is not necessarily growing so fast. That would probably have a high cap rate, right? The cap rate on that might be a little high because the risk on that type of property will be higher. So, that means the value of that property goes down, right? So that inverse relationship is important to understand when discussing cap rates, because sometimes that gets thrown away, gets thrown around all the time, and people don't realize that cap rates have an inverse relationship to value. Now, the cap rate that is the one thing that is important to note is that typically with a higher cap rate, there is that cap rate usually means that there is a higher return on it, but it's like that's the risk. You're taking the risk, right? So the return on something traditionally on a lower cap rate project is usually lower, but the risk is also very low. The return on a higher cap rate asset is usually higher, but the risk is also higher. So you just got to take, I guess, the good with the bad. That's basically how it works. So anyways, so those are some of the things that are happening in the market that I think are really having an impact. I really would like to see, I really hope that we start seeing a little bit employers thinking about how they're paying their employees. And I know that they have a bottom line, so I know that's part of the challenge. We have some expenses that have changed with regard to insurances. This has impacted both residential and commercial insurance, property insurance, property taxes, right? And then just the cost of maintenance. All those things have gone up in price, so that makes it difficult for for companies to be able to get better margins. Obviously, some of the bigger companies are well positioned to be able to probably do a little better with salaries than smaller companies. So that is something that I hope we start seeing, because I do think it's a concern to have that age demographic between 20 and 30 leaving. So that is something that I do have some serious concerns about. So that being said, I know there's a lot of stuff, a lot of things that we keep seeing just sort of in the world that's making people nervous in general. I'm going to just kind of touch on this. So I see on TV and I see on the internet, on social, right, a bunch of negativity, which is really unfortunate because it kind of depicts something that I don't feel is real. And this is something that really concerns me. So, if you look at social media, if you look at the news, like a lot of what you see there is just sort of like uh, you see I guess you could say, clash of the titans, right? You see people that are, angry at one side versus the other. They're haters on both sides. That they're crazy people on both sides, and fascists and racists and uh, uh, woke craziness, and depending on what side you're on, those are the terms that you're hearing, right? And what's interesting to me is that is not something that I am seeing in my day to day life. And I think that the reason why that is important to note is because, like, I only see it on the box that is my TV or my phone or my computer, right? So is it real? And I don't know that it is. I'm not seeing all of the vitriol in my personal life. I don't talk to people and they don't sound that way, right? I don't have engagement with people and they have these sort of crazy positions. Most of the people that I talk to, the vast majority of people that I talk to, actually have, sort of reasonable positions. So I wonder how much of the thing that we're seeing on the news, or in headlines, uh, on social. I wonder how much of that is real. I don't feel like it is, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, because I it's frustrating because I don't watch very much news anymore. I do try to pay attention to what's going on in the world through different um, YouTubers and other things. But anytime I take a peek into the news or into social media, I do see just a lot of um, I, I don't even know what to call it. Like, it's just sort of like people playing sides, and I don't see that in real life. And I feel like what we're seeing online is sort of like a play or a movie or a show, because what I see in my real life does not mirror what I'm seeing in my little box. So I'd be interested to hear if you guys had any thoughts on, like, what are you seeing in real life that is mirroring what we see in the media, what we see on social. Like, I, I maybe I'm just disconnected. I don't see that. And I would be interested to see if you guys are seeing that, because it's so strange to me to that online it seems like people hate each other, and then but in person, like, nobody behaves that way. Now, of course, you're always going to have your Karens, and you're always going to have your assholes that do this and do that, but it's so rare for me to run into somebody like that. So I want to get a better understanding of what you guys are seeing, because I think that the idea of that is driving anxiety and making people more cautious and nervous than they need to be. And I don't know if that's on purpose. It seems like it might be, but it doesn't seem to be reflective of what is real in the world. And I I I want to get a good idea of what's happening, right? I want to get a good idea of what's happening in here in the United States, and then what's happening in other places in the world. And I feel like, for for what for all the challenges that we have as a country, it seems like, there's a lot more we have in common, and that people are moving in a forward direction than not. And I don't understand why I'm seeing so much negativity on these platforms, other than, you know, people want to see a train wreck, right? People want to see a train wreck. That has to be it. People just they like seeing train wrecks. It's like when you drive on the expressway and there's there's a wreck on the side of the road, and it's on the other side of the expressway. It's not even on your side. And then you have traffic because people want to see the wreck. So I think that's what it is. It feels like that's what it is. I feel like everyone's stopping to see the wreck and then saying how bad the wreck is, and then not realizing that is not, it's not even a real wreck. It's the idea of a wreck that could happen, that might happen, that may happen. It's not likely to happen, but could, right? So I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's like a picture of a wreck, and they're like, "Oh, this could happen," and then people are stopping to look at the picture, right? Um, but then that could cause a wreck. You know what I mean? So I don't. It's really difficult. I really want to get a better understanding of that, and I feel like I can't be the only person that's looking at this and saying this is not real. This is not legit. I don't see that. And I don't want to be like that person that's like, oh well, because of where I live, I'm privileged, so maybe I don't see all of that stuff. But I get the impression that this is happening everywhere. But when I talk to people that are all over the place, they say the same thing. Oh no, I don't see that in my person. I ask people, I'm like, hey, do you see this in your life? Like, are you talking to people that behave this way or talk this way, or are you seeing any of this? And I have not yet met anyone who says, yes, I see this all the time. This is a problem, right? I've not seen anybody. Everyone has their, oh yeah, I ran into this guy or I ran into this lady and they were blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I don't see that happening just in general. So anyways, it's a little bit of a rant. I wanted to bring it up because I'm really disturbed by it. And I feel like I'm going crazy. I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel like I'm kind of going crazy because I feel like I'm the only one who's looking at this stuff. Well, and that's not true. My wife is this way too. Um, I feel like I look at the stuff that's online and I'm like trying to figure out like who believes this is real, because half of the stuff that I'm seeing online, I mean, I don't even believe it's legit. It's hard for me to even believe that it's legit. And I'm not even talking about the AI stuff. I'm just talking about like all the political fodder that's happening and how the news is treating things, and there's different YouTubers that have all these sort of political slants and stuff like that, and just all that stuff. Like, what is happening? Because it seems like catastrophe is happening, and I don't I don't understand that. I mean, even this whole, okay, so I'm gonna kind of touch on something. Hopefully, this doesn't trigger anybody. This whole situation with Elon Musk and Doge. Let's just use that as an example. I don't understand. I understand. Let me back up. I understand that it is unusual to have someone like Elon Musk, um, play a role in this capacity to look to see how, um, to evaluate like what's happening with our budgets. I totally get that. That's very unusual. It's atypical, whatever. But I don't know that that necessarily bothers me. People talk about, oh, he doesn't have the appropriate clearances. I don't know if you guys know this, but well, I'll just share this with you. He builds rockets for the government, right? Like for sure, he's got some kind of top secret clearance. He's got to have. As a matter of fact, people who work for him have to pass certain clearances in order to work for SpaceX. Like, that's a thing. So it's not like he has no clearance. He's got to have something because he's already doing business at a really high level with the government. So, this whole idea that he doesn't have that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why. I mean, maybe there's a specific clearance he needs or something like that, but it's not like he's just some guy off the street. Like, he's clearly got some kind of clearances. He builds rockets for the government. Like, he does business directly with with the federal government. Like, he's got something for sure. So maybe he needs a special something, but he's certainly got something. He's not some Joe Schmo off the street. So that's one. And the other thing is like, I understand the concern of like he may get access to certain information, but let's find out what access he has or doesn't have before making speculation, right? Because there was a lot of speculation as it related to that. But conceptually, I mean, I don't disagree with the idea of like having someone review how money is being spent to see if we're like being wasteful somewhere. Like, I don't see how that's a problem. Like, you can maybe make arguments as to like how that's being done, or like maybe there's a specific security clearance he needs to get, and make those kind of comments. But I don't understand why people are just completely against the idea of having an independent person evaluate essentially the books of the federal government to see like how money's being spent. Because I feel like that's not a bad use of our resources to see, well, hey, how are we spending money? And previous administrations have talked about doing that, but they've never really done anything. So, doing something different like this seems like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like a bad idea. I, I'm just, for me personally. So I am not a fan of Trump, but I don't think that particular idea is a bad one. There are other ideas that I think are way worth more, I guess, debate about. Like, I don't understand that one. So I'm interested to hear like why is there so much debate about that particular thing and not other things that are, like there's no debate about like the clarity of the reasons for Russia getting into Ukraine. Like, I guess there was some debate over that, but it just seems like everyone on one side is saying, "Oh, Putin is Darth Vader," and the other side is saying, "Oh, you know, um, there's a conspiracy theory about that whole situation," and there's not really a real conversation of the real concern of having, you know, Ukraine in NATO, for example. That's like a logistical problem. I mean, if China wanted to have uh, military bases in Mexico, that would be a problem for us. We would be like, hell no. So that's kind of the same for them. So I feel like I don't understand that. So I'd be interested just to kind of hear, like, is that just what we're seeing on TV, or do you feel like there are people out there that are just that way, and maybe I'm not seeing them so much? Because I think most people kind of like agree that some of these things, they're like, at least conceptually, some of these things make sense, and aren't just sort of stark on one side or versus the other. There's just sort of, there's a lot of nuance here that I feel like we don't get on the news or in social. So anyways, it was just a thought that I had, and I'd be interested to hear your 2 cents on that. So if you guys have any comments, please leave comment below on anything I said before, anything I just said right now. If you have any specific questions or topics that you want me to talk about, please make sure you leave a comment. If you like what you're hearing, please like, please share, and let people know. I'd love to get more people watching and getting feedback. So thank you for your time. This has been the Ortiz Anomaly podcast. My name is Gus Ortiz. I appreciate you. I'll see you next time. Peace.